Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a learning session with special guest Rabbi Danny Landes, Unforgiven, When Teshuvah Might Not Be Enough.
First, I'll tell you the official stuff, then I'll tell you the real stuff, okay? Rabbi Landes was ordained by Rav Aryeh Levin, Tzvi Yehuda Cook, and the chief rabbi, Rabbi Avram Shapiro in New York. He was a founding faculty member of the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles, director of education, and of Yeshiva of Los Angeles, the Van Lennep Chair of Social Ethics. He was also an adjunct associate professor of law at Loyola Law School, and he taught for the Wexner Foundation for over 20 years. He made Aliyah and came to Pardes in Jerusalem in 1995 as director, and has been active in creation of advanced Talmud classes, PQ Talmud, the Fellows, PEP, the Kollel, the Executive Seminar Programs, the annual Blaustein and Brettler Scholar Series, Pardes USA, and the Strengthening of the Pardes Beit Midrash. He was the first rabbi to be invited by Indonesia to speak publicly at the Forum of Religions. He announced in July 2016 that after 21 years of dedicated service to Pardes, he would be leaving at the end of the summer. He is now the director of Yashrut, having founded the Institute in 2018 to build civil discourse, really important, through a theology of integrity, justice, and tolerance. Yashrut includes a Semikhah initiative as well as programs for rabbinic leaders. He has ordained 43 rabbis during his career, 7 of whom received Semikhah from him under the auspices of Yashrut in 2019. And in that year in Jerusalem, he ordained Daniel Atwood, that became the first openly gay person to be ordained as an Orthodox rabbi. Among his publications are co-editor with Alex Robman of Genocide, Critical Issues in the Holocaust, editor of Confronting Omnicide, and the Jewish Law section of My People's Prayer Book, and he published articles in Tikkun and the Jewish Review of Books. Well, the real story is, he's from Chicago and I'm from Milwaukee, and we met at Camp Ramon, Wisconsin. I remember in 1964, in particular, I was 21. You don't have to do the math. I'm 80. And I was a counselor in Machon, and he was a camper in Machon. Not in my bunk, I think. I think we were in Mike Menachem Sacks. Oh, sorry. Okay, whatever. Right. And then after both of us became rabbis and found ourselves in Los Angeles, he, together with Rabbi David Ellenson and I, did this kind of traveling roadshow of the three movements, right, to explain the three movements for a number of years while we were here. For many years, since 1974, I've been teaching a course together with Arthur Rosette originally, on Jewish law at the law school at UCLA, and each year we would have an Orthodox rabbi, conservative rabbi, and a Reform rabbi come to describe what that means in contemporary life, and he was the Orthodox rabbi a couple of times. This goes back a very long way, and I must say, since those years, a lot has happened, hasn't it? Right? And we've been all right, the three of us. Okay. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Okay, first the official story, and then I'll give you the real story. The official.
Before you start.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. A mundane announcement. If someone is driving a beige car, you didn't leave your keys and you're blocking someone in. So if we could just move your car, that would be awesome. That's all they told me. I don't know what else to say. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So the official story is that at Camp Ramah, Wisconsin, which I was sent to, my parents were looking for a kosher sports camp. I might have been the only kid sent to Ramah, Wisconsin for sports, because they try to do something with me. I had my first class in theology with the young Elliot Dorff, and it was riveting and it was special. It also had the impact of every conversation. I hear he's a very personable guy, but every conversation I've had with Rabbi Dr. Professor Dorff has been extremely illuminating, and I've always had to move myself up to get to that level that you were trying to schlep me to. And you're still doing it. That's the official story. The unofficial story is, because it just came back to me. So I used to live on Holtz, right, block down. And when they put in the Eruv was put in, there was a group of about 20 rabbis who lived in different parts. And Eruv was small at that time. East, it got as far as La Cienega, as far as, on purpose, as far as this shul. And the first week, we're supposed to be on alert. I get an emergency call half hour before Shabbos. There's a problem at the 7-Eleven. And I should go there, but the emergency crew, all non-Jews, are coming, but I should be able to direct them and all the rest. So I went, and I was in my jeans, whatever, a T-shirt, and I'm looking, and then at that exit that's on La Cienega, entrance exit, I saw what had happened. A large truck had knocked down the wire, and I found one end, because it was still up high, and I found the other end, and I was holding it like this. And all the congregants to this worthy synagogue were passing by, coming for, davening. And this is what they said. They said, "Good Shabbos, Rabbi Landes. How are you, Rabbi Landes?" And, it was getting really painful. And Rabbi Dorff came by. I said, Rabbi Dorff. He comes by. He walks up to me and says, "Actually, your stance is more emblematic of another religion." Thank you, Rabbi Dorff. I held that story for a lot of years. Anyway, situation in Israel is no laughing matter. I believe they were headed, or there are people in Israel heading us to what's now called very recently autocratic legalism. Though one gal, I read Hebrew translation. I thought she wrote it in Hebrew. I didn't realize she's a professor at Princeton. Really tough in Hebrew. But she writes about illegal, and she's really studying Orban in Hungary and Erdogan in Turkey. And with basically illegal autocracy doesn't come in with the tanks. They come in with an election. They don't say what their goal really is. They keep themselves pretty. No one talked about judicial reform. I'm just telling you. Maybe a hint, but nothing special about that. And they don't come with tanks. They come in with a democratic election. Hopefully, the last democratic election for them, in their minds. They come in with a coalition of people that each has their own one thing that they want very much. I'll just, the Haredim, and I come from that. The Haredim want many things. They want housing, other things, entitlements, yes, okay. But they want an absolute patur, exemption from the army. That's it. The religious Zionists, not all religious Zionists are settlers, but the settlers are the dominant thing. They want one thing. They want the land, and they want nobody else necessarily on the land. To think, they'll tell you that. Just talk. Just talk to people. The Likud wants power, money, patronage. There's a prime minister who wants to keep out of jail. All of this, keep one guy out of jail. And I reviewed this with my son Isaac, who teaches in my institution as well. But he says, you're forgetting from the other side. And all of us who are out there protesting, the secular Zionists, I'm not a secular Zionist, I'm a recovering religious Zionist. The secular the secular Zionists, what do they want? As one fellow, my son reports him, said, "Chashavnu sheyesh od 25 shanim." We thought we had another 25 years. There's an inner weakness in secular Zionism. Everybody has a child who's actually living in Oslo or living in London or living in Berkeley, or a daughter who's in LA doing fashion. No, there's a real problem, and they feel this is the last stance. The fact that I can march, just be allowed to march with secular Zionists and actually spoken at a couple of different things. What a busha, what a shame for them. 20 years ago, they never let me speak. What, have a religious guy, a follower of Rav Kook, guy wearing a kippah? But now they're pretty desperate, so they have to look for allies also. And that's how I see the situation. What to make of it further? Well, within it, we're going to learn Torah because your rabbi has announced that we're going to learn Torah. So I could go on with the Sunday morning politics forever, but actually I have 4 major talks. This is number 3 of the 4 talks I'm giving. They're all, because I have a couple of people showing up, but and they all use different Torah material. Because I'm in this, it's because it's a wide issue, and I'm looking in. I wish I could find easy psak, easy halakhic ruling, but I need. This is the language we speak. This is how we understand ourselves. And as it happens, some of the issues are talked about. So what I'm going to do with you today, what you have here, is the story of Achav. Actually, the story of Ahab, right? But not Melville. The story of, I did read it 2 years ago. Did read it, the whole book. 7 trips to America. I read the whole thing. Okay. So Achav, Ahab, the 7th king of Israel, the other person in the story, 3 people in the story. The other person is Elijah, Eliyahu, and I'm not going to talk too much about Eliyahu. Eliyahu's, just maybe one thing to show you about Eliyahu that we sing so sweetly about on Motzei Shabbos and Havdalah, Eliyahu, that, at every bris, Eliyahu is there. The Kiseisha Eliyahu. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So, but Eliyahu, very, very tough guy. A lot to be said about him, but I'm going to try not to talk about him. I'm going to talk about Achav. So, review briefly, even though I got a couple of pages with you. Right, look. Soften you up with a couple of stories, right? Now we do a little work to try to get enough knowledge, background, right, about the stories. Remind yourself about that. Then I want to move into the Gemara just for a moment or two. And then, of course, the Rambam, because I do look for answers in the Rambam. That much I learned from Rabbi Dorff. Now, so in 1 Kings chapter 16, that's the first page of what I have. 1 Kings chapter 16, they talk about Achav, the son of Omri. Omri already introduced some Baal worship. That's bad. And then in verse 30, Achav does the evil side of the Shem, Hara b'nei Adonai. And, what's he doing? And 31, it's the Hebrew is like really great, Lamed Aleph. He says, Lamed Aleph, Rabbi Rembam, my teacher. You see Lamed Aleph there? I know, put on your glasses. Just read the first couple lines, because I didn't give you covet, I'm sorry. Lamed Aleph. Vayehi. Vayehi. comes to the Beis Medrash to learn without reading. Lachto. Yeah, the type is not so great. Lachto. Right. And it came to pass, if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nevat, that in other words, he covered all the sins of Yerovam ben Nevat, who's the paradigm, the Talmud will talk about it, we'll get to that, who is the paradigm of evildoers. He's the one who split the kingdom, 10 tribes to the top, putting up places of idolatry in Bethel and then further up in Dan. And so people wouldn't go on pilgrimage anymore to Yerushalayim, wouldn't even split it. I mean, terrible guy. He covered it. It was simple. That was like nothing for him. What could he marry then? He took Jezebel. We're going to talk about her. So she's the main character too. Daughter of Enthabal from Tyre, the Tzidonians, okay? And they serve Baal and they worship. And 32, altar for Baal and the house of Baal in Shomron. And 33, also wasn't enough, the Asherah tree for all the nature lovers, worship nature, okay, and they did. In other words, all this is a very interesting term, lahachis et Hashem Elokei Yisrael, to provoke the Lord God. In other words, he knew what he was doing. Lahachis, it means to not just he believed, there was a function to this. He was poking, as it were, if possible, God. Now, what happens next is a whole series of encounters, which I don't have on the page, and skirmishes, and then the one I don't have on the page, the battle of the gods, the battle of the bands on Har Carmel, Mount Carmel, right? And, doesn't matter how many priests there are, and there's hundreds of priests of idolatry, they can't get the altar to light, right? And we know the story. We love the story. And what happens next? What happens next is Eliyahu takes all this water, and from heaven comes down. In the meantime, he's mocking the priests and all that. And then afterwards, he slaughters the priests of the idolatrous prophets. The idolatrous prophets. You could be a prophet, idolatrous prophet. You send away. You got you get a certificate. I had to send away. I did a wedding in end of June in Sun Valley. And they didn't consider my smicha good enough. So my sins, it's Rosh Hashanah, my sins, I send away to one of those mills that send you back. I sent them, I don't believe in Jesus, they didn't care. Send the $25. We'll make you a pastor. So they made me a pastor. So Ahab, verse 1. So here's my point. My point is when we hear this Haftorah, and as a kid, I heard the Haftorah how many times. I also learned it. But I thought that's the end of things. But it turned out all it was a skirmish. The power is with the king. And the power over the king is Jezebel. And that's just a loss. And you have people who are ready to take a loss, big losses, even as long as they think they can manipulate things so that at the end they'll still be in power. By the way, sorry to make that analogy, but that's exactly what's happening. They'll take an economic loss. They'll allow companies billions of dollars to leave Israel. They'll allow for terrible panic and dismay within the secular Zionist camp that in one of the best schools in Tel Aviv, the 230 kids sign a petition, we're not going to the army. They'll take it. We have people to put in the army. Not Haredim. Religious Zion. We'll take the loss. Why? because we'll be in dismay. And what happens when you're in dismay and chaos? What kind of leader do you need? A strong leader. And we have a strong leader. And if you think it's Netanyahu, you're wrong. Smotrich, Ben Gvir, they're ready. They are totally ready. And if you listen to them, this is what they're basically saying. Don't worry about it. We have things covered. We'll suffer for a while. Some people will leave the country. And that's verse 1 of the next chapter. Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, how he slain all the prophets with the sword. Jezebel sends a messenger. I'm sorry, I should say Izebel, but somehow saying the word Jezebel. I grew up in the south side of Chicago. There's a rhythm to that. Jezebel. Then Jezebel sent a message unto Elijah saying, let the gods do to me, and more so, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow. In other words, if I don't slay you. And what did Eliyahu, who won this incredible battle, do? He fled for his life. He fled and fled for his life. He went somewhere that didn't even know where he was. He lay down behind, under the rotem, under the broom tree. 5, he lay down and slept under a broom tree, and behold, an angel touched him and said unto him, Cum es, arise, eat. And it's like a Jewish moment there. By the way, have you seen, what movie am I thinking about? Oppenheimer. It's Robbie Grossman, who works with me, my CEO. Have you seen Oppenheimer? You have to see Oppenheimer. Just at least to see the collection of Jewish brains. Okay? Oppenheimer. One consistent thing in the film is one of the guys who later on got a Nobel Prize periodically gives Oppenheimer something to eat. Because Oppenheimer forgets to eat. A Jewish moment. Arise, and I'm willing to come back and talk about that movie. The next night I saw Golda. I saw 3 movies this year, all night after night, and I'm also happy to talk about Barbie. Now, there's a lot there. So things are terrible. Jezebel knows that Eliyahu's formidable, but not formidable enough. She'll take it to the brink. She doesn't care. So now we come to the story that you're familiar with about Navot, the Jezreelite. That's just the name of an area. He's a Jewish guy. Had a vineyard in Jezreel. That's 1 Kings 21. It was right next to Ahab's mansion, palace. Ahab says, let's exchange vineyard. I'll get you something good. I'm the king. I'll get you a different one. I like the one right next. Let me take yours or I'll pay you. And Navot says to Ahab, Chas v'sholom, but he says actually, how does he say it? Chalila li me Hashem. Beautiful. We say the word Chalila. That's right. Chalila li me Hashem. Mititi et nachalat avotai lach, to give from the inheritance of my father unto thee. It's not easy to give up an inheritance. I'm going to lie down right now. I'm sorry, I'm going now to the control. I'm going to lie down right now and give the inheritance, our moral inheritance, everything that has to do with the land of Israel, all the aspirations, even the failures. We're going to hand it over to guys that are ready to turn Yad Vashem into just a public relations complete gimmick, to turn it into, I'm not apologizing anymore. If you just read what they want to do with Yad Vashem, turn it into a fascist machine for propaganda with no self-criticism. They were turning into education into a joke. So 1 or 2 Wexner people here, they forbade Itamar, forbade any of the mid-level management for spending a year in Harvard That's provided by the Wexner Foundation because it's involved with very leftist ideas, democracy, transparency, competence. Didn't even get into that. Very incompetent group of the gang that can't shoot straight. And my fear is that sometimes they will be able to shoot straight. And I'm not giving my inheritance. So Navot says to Achav, forbid, I'm not going to do it. That's verse 3. Verse 4, Achav comes home, sullen and displeased, because of the word which Navot the Jezreelite. So in his brain, it's interesting, he keeps on saying what happened there. I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers. Can't not stop saying. And he lays down upon his bed, and he turns out, and we're on the page 2. And he turns away his face, and he eats no bread. And Jezebel comes to him, you don't eat any bread? Which I guess her conversion was pretty good. And he said, you don't eat any bread? And 6, he says to her, and he repeats the whole story. What does he sound like, Achav? Spoiled child, an incompetent child, an idiot child. Excuse me, none of ours, but this is what he sounds like. 7, Jezebel says to him in the Hebrew, Vatomer elav Yizebel ishto, Ata, you, Ata ta'aseh melucha Yisrael. You're acting like a king? You're not acting like a king, but she doesn't say you're not acting. You're acting like a king. She makes that kind of question. Arise, eat bread, be merry. I'll give you it. Then she wrote letters in Achav's name, and there's a whole conspiracy. Sent letters to the elders and the nobles, and she wrote in the letters saying, proclaim a fast and set Navot at the head of people, and set 2 men, base fellows, before him, and let them bear witness against Navot, saying you're not even allowed, actually, to say these words, curse, and then say the name of the Almighty. We say bless God, meaning the opposite of bless, because it's such a horrendous thing. Right? What are the ministers in the Likud doing right now? Calling the chief of staff of Tzahal, where we send our children, we put them in the hand, calling them an enemy of Israel. They're calling them an enemy of Israel. They aid the terrorists. You get rid of the Supreme Court. Going back to this sub-lecture I'm giving you on this, this autism, not autism, it sounds like autism. Autocracy, and the illegal nature of autocracy. So what you do is you get the vote, and then you get rid of all the checks and balances. You get rid of the Supreme Court, get rid of the moral force of the option, and you curse out the army, carry him out and stone him that he die. And that's exactly what happens in 11 and 12 and 13. He blessed God. We'll take him out and we'll stone him. And that's what they did in 13. And in 14, they told Jezebel that it happened. And in 15, Jezebel sends a message to Achav, arise, take possession of the vineyard. Actually, not the best translation. Kum reish et kerem devot. Rise and reish, from the word Yerusha. Take as your inheritance. That's exactly what's happening now. It's our inheritance. Gemara has, which I'm not going to show you, but I'll just say, Gemara has a question there. What do you mean inheritance and all that? Well, he said there's a machoket, disagreement in Gemara, and one says that the king, a king who dispossesses, who, if someone dies by royal decree, is executed by royal decree, let's say it better, executed by royal decree, actually by royal decree, the property goes to the king. Another rabbi said, no, actually it wasn't that. What it was is that Achav was actually the nephew of Navot, and therefore he had a hand in, and Achav may have also had the children of Navot, who was probably an elderly man at that point, executed as well. In any event, in either case, that's why the law is being used. It's not like there won't be law. There'll be law. It'll be law like this. And that's exactly what happens. So Achav does it. He goes down in 16. He possesses. The word comes to Elijah. You better go down and you better confront Achav. By the way, Eliyahu has a hell of a time. I mean, he's running all the time. He's got to do military work. He has to go up against hard people, and it's not some English-made movie that he's speaking the King's English, and he's wearing a simple but nicely tailored gown, and he speaks, these wonderful things. He's probably croaking this out. He's the Shmendrik. He's the Nudnik. He's coming alone. And the word of the speak to him saying, and here it becomes a very big phrase, Haratzachta v'gam yarashta. Never understood it fully as a kid. I don't know if I fully understand it now. Will you murder? What do they say here? Kill? No, it's murder. Ratzach is murder. Will you murder and indeed inherit? In other words, maybe it's a protest against that law or that custom or however the law has been used. Nothing more evil than that. Sometimes we can understand certain things happening, but this combination of murder and taking over property, it's going to go somewhere. What I'm talking about is going to go somewhere. And 21, I'll bring evil upon thee. I will sweep thee away. This is God speaking through Elijah. I'll make thy house like the house of Yerovim, the son of Nebat. In other words, that dynasty was ended, divine punishment. Now turn to page 3. The Lord says, the dog shall eat Izebel, and he, the 24, him that dieth Achav in the city, the dog shall also eat, meaning from his family. 25, there's none like unto Achav. Achav, I got to hand it to you. Rak lo hayah k'Achav. There's no one like you. You're the worst we ever produced. You gave yourself over to the most evil. We never had anyone like you. Jewish irony, the irony. I have to say this. I had a gal who worked for a year coming from Northern California, worked for a year in a cannery to afford to study with me in Pardes. And she came and she wanted to convert to Judaism. She worked for the year in order to do that and to make the money. Family, really a family of farmers. I mean, far away as possible. She went to a certain university and she studied as a minor in the Jewish Studies Department, which consisted solely of modern Jewish literature. So I said, from Portnoy's Complaint, you want to become Jewish? I mean, like, it's not like she was studying something holy. And she said, no, it was something else. And I said to her, I thought, and I looking at her back, I said, it was the irony, wasn't it? You like the irony in Jewish writing. She said, that's it. I want to be ironic. Jews for, I bought her a T-shirt. I made it up. Jews for irony. In any event, this is very painful to me. That's why I go off and tell a story, right? I find this very painful. I'm hocking and I'm yelling because I find this very painful. I generally come to Israel, I come to America, and immediately, and it's chutzpah, I start talking like I know something, and I talk like something I remember my first trip, one of my first trips back to America, 28 years ago. I don't remember. It was something like this. I said on a radio show, well, when we entered Jenin, and my daughter wrote me, we entered Jenin? But where were you? Were you there? And entered Jenin? But I have to defend Israel. I'm part of that. I feel comfortable sharing that with you here, as my grandfather, a great Orthodox Rav, great Talmid Chacham, would say to me in my earlier, more radical days. I think I'm still a radical. I just changed the directions. He says, remember one thing about the conservative movement. They've never been tainted by anti-Zionism. Only movement, not tainted by anti-Zionism. So I'm talking this way. I'm sharing pain with you. That's what it really comes down to. Trying to figure it out. It's not going to stop me. But something happens. So we're on page 3, verse 27. So Achav hears all these words. He tears kriya. He puts on sackcloth. He's got the ashes. He's in tzom. He's in fasting. And he goes softly on his way. And the word of the Lord comes to Elijah and says, see how Ahab humbleth. Actually, it says nichna, or subjugates himself to God. So that's actually a stronger form. And he realized who's the real king. Before me, do you see that, Eliyahu? Because he subjugates himself before me, I will not bring the evil in his days, but in his son's days will I bring the evil upon his house. I didn't catch that. I've always had a problem with that. I'm going to try to answer, what does that mean? Finish up from the book of Kings. Very strange piece. So there comes forth a spirit, stands before Hashem. We don't have a lot of that in Tanakh, at least the Tanakh I've been reading. Okay? And the Lord says unto him, and he says, I will go forth and will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. So there's a spirit, a ruach, standing before Kodesh Baruch Hu, amongst all the other spirits. If you're confused, please be confused, because we don't really have depictions like this. And I will be a spirit, and I will be a lying spirit. Eitzei v'hayiti ruach sheker, befi called niva'av, in the mouth of all his prophets. In other words, I will infiltrate all his prophets that he listens to, and I will make them deviate from what they should say. And God says, entice him, and you shall prevail. So the Lord puts a lying spirit in the mouth of all those prophets, and the Lord had spoken evil concerning this. So basically what the lying spirit does, it says to Achav, you know what? This is a good time to go against Aram. We'll go into battle. You go with Yehoshaphat, who's the king of Judea. He happens to be a righteous man, generally speaking. He's a righteous man. We'll go out together. Yerovam says to himself, but I better go in disguise because, I still remember the earlier prophecy. And I don't know what's going to be now. And so a whole thing there on page 3 and the second half. And basically he goes out in disguise. Yehoshaphat is shown as a great warrior. And verse 34, and a certain man, it says Ish, that's a man in the enemies, Aram. And a certain man drew his bow at a venture and smote the king of Israel between the lower armor and the breastplate. Okay? Wherefore he said to the driver of the chariot, turn my hand and carry me out, for I am sore wounded. The battle increased, and the king was propped up in his chariot against the Arameans and died middle of the day, at the evening time, and his blood ran out. And the dogs, if you go on with it, the next couple of lines, dogs licked his blood, as we said before. So what's this about? What I'd like you to do on page 5, skip 4 right now. We're going to come back. We'll come back to the Rambam. And on page 5 from the Gemara of the Sanhedrin. We're not going to do the whole page. We'll do a piece of it. So the Gemara Sanhedrin tries to explain some pieces of the Malachim text, of the king's text. Tries to explain some parts of it that we might have. So like it says, it was a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, of Nevat. Rabbi Yochanan said, what does it mean? Light. The light transgressions, minor transgressions, which Ahab committed were equal to the gravest committed by Jeroboam. Meaning, Yeroboam did terrible sins, but those were light sins for what Achav did. Why then does Scripture make Yeroboam the exemplar of sin? Because he was the first to be corrupt. He was the first to do it. He broke the wall, and therefore he allowed for other kings to even be worse. And goes on in this way in different directions explaining this. But in the middle of the page it says, why did Ahab merit royalty for 22 years? Because he honored the Torah. There was another part of, he was a donor. So good before the holidays. At the same time, he hedged his bets. He was a major donor. He was holding the Sefer Torah on Kol Nidre night. He was a major donor because he honored the Torah, which was given in 22 letters. And then the rest of the Gemara talks about that, Jezebel made sure that all this money was given for Baal worship, for worship adoration. But Ahab had something something in his being that allowed him to do something. So what is this about? Well, basically what the Gemara is trying to do, go to page 6. What the Gemara is trying to do is actually raise the stakes. Raise the stakes. In fact, this is where it says, the second line. But there was none like unto Ahab, which did sell himself to work with wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel's wife stirred up. We saw that in the verses. Whereupon it was taught, now we're back in the Gemara, every day she used to weigh out gold shekels for idols. Yet thou sayest he was equally balanced. There's the whole thing. He did bad things and he did some good things. But Ahab was generous with his money, and because he used to benefit scholars with his wealth, half of his sins were forgiven. And so we're right in the middle. There came forth, you understand, so what do we do? The Gemara does this. It wants, as I said, raise the stakes of the drama. So he's doing some good things. Can he pay out? Well, maybe half of his sins. Maybe. But what happens? So these next lines are important. There came forth the Spirit, quoting, before the Lord and said, I will persuade him. And the Lord said, wherewith? And he said, I will go forth and be a lying spirit in the mouth of the prophets. We saw that. And God says, you shall persuade him and prevail. You'll be successful. Go forth and do so. Then the Gemara asks the question, a lying, what spirit is this? We usually don't talk about spirits. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan says, the spirit of Nevot, the Jezreelite. There was a spirit. It was Nevot's spirit. So when I learned this originally, relearned it, I said, oh, that's Nevot. It's his nakama, it's his revenge, right? He goes forth, he enters it, he tells, go into the battle and you'll be fine, etc. Then it finally occurred to me, no, it's different. Achav may have done Teshuvah. And the rabbis are ready to say he did some form of Teshuvah. The Tanakh text, the text says he humbled himself, he subjugated himself. But they said, but something remains. What he did to Nevot remains. And his ability to murder and to take over corrupted his entire spirit, even that he did teshuvah. It corrupts him. It makes him feel invincible. All things are possible. We'll put the right people on the court. We'll find the base fellows to lie. We'll cast all groups of people as leftists and as enemies. We'll do that because we're able to do that. So I'll go into battle. I'll be okay. It was a spirit of Nevot. It's not revenge of a mystical Nevot spirit. It's a Nevot spirit that he inculcated in himself, not of Nevot, the spirit of what he did to Nevot. And this is what happens. And it becomes even worse for another generation. So how does the Rambam see it? We now got all the stuff, and we can now go to the Rambam. The Rambam's on page 4. And the Rambam on page 4, I think, Mishnah Torah, from the book of Nezikin, damages, the section that deals with murder and saving life. And middle of 9, I should take it, second line. If a defendant is liable for execution, be executed. If not liable for execution, he should be released. Although there are other sins that are more serious, in other words, basically saying no rachmanut, no mercy, there are other sins that are more serious than murder. They do not present as serious a danger to society as murder does. Now, what's murder? Here, what's the term? Danger to society and all the rest. Even though there are sins that are worse even than murder. Remember Rambam, the philosopher, Rambam that's looking at what signifies an act. He'll explain himself in a moment. You'll agree or disagree. But catch what he's saying. Ein bohem hashchatat yeshuvo shalom k'shefichut damim. Here it says danger to society. Not good. There is nothing that destroys civilization than murder. And that's why there should be no mercy for the murderer. You can argue, disagree with that, but that's his assessment. And now he explains. Even idol worship, and you will say adultery, incest is not the right translation here. Adultery or the violation of the Sabbath are not considered as severe as murder, even those ones. For these sins involve man's relationship with God. Incest is not, it has to be adultery. Involve man's relationship with God, while murder also involves man's relationship with fellow man. Many things you can do to your fellow human being, but once you murder, that's it. Whoever commits this sin is an utterly wicked person. But what I want to look at, which I've always missed in the Rambam, but I started to see it last night, is this principle of Yishuv Shalom, civilizing society. It's an underlying motif in rabbinic value system. Who contributes to the civilizing, the settling, Yishuv could mean settling, but in a good way, settling of society, civilizing of society. It means because of that principle, a parent needs to teach a child. In the Gemara it says a man needs to teach a son, but even hardline poskim have agreed today. It means also parents to both children needs to teach them a profession, teach them a way, because if you don't teach them profession, you saw that in Pirkei Avot, you don't teach them a profession, then you're teaching them how to rob, because they'll have nothing to, you're teaching them how to cheat. And this in the Gemara here is saying, and this is because it's a violation of Yeshuva Olam. You have to have society be stable. And and in the case here, they're talking about murder. But the underlying principle, why murder is so bad, it's the most destabilizing thing possible. that's in the positive sense about Yeshiva, that you're supposed to teach a child a profession. So thank you for paying all that tuition. And you should continue. They should finish, and they should bring you nachas. But on that same principle, a gambler is forbidden to be a witness. Not forbidden; it's disqualified for being a witness. And Gemara has two reasons. One reason, it's a machloket, disagreement. One reason is that gambling is based on it's kind of a stealing, because you're really trying to chop somebody else's money. We can talk about that. But the other opinion, which is the first opinion is the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. The second opinion, that of the Ramah, the Ashkenazic codifier, is that a person who's not involved b'yeshuvo she'olam, with civilizing society, how can you trust that person? How can that person be a witness? Where am I at? Where are we at? Just do a little bit more in the Maimonides and we'll get it. There was none like Ahab. You see that printed there? Gave him over himself to wickedness. And yet when his merits and sins were weighed in the presence of the Lord of Spirits, no sin that warranted the truth was not counterbalanced by a positive quality except the blood. So I'm saying this now in two ways. Go to Yeshiva. We're in a situation that we all talk about tikkun ha'olam. You got to move it higher. How about just existing and not ending up in chaos, not ending up people on the street, not ending up distrust for every institution that we have? That ends Yishuv Shalom. We'll have a strong leader who will take care of it. That's Putin. We don't need that. We can't have that. We can't exist. And the words I don't want to say, and I'll just say it. And the problem of bloodshed is also a problem, where all this is leading. It's a tremendous problem. Who's going to go quietly to this kind of a life? People are not going to go quietly. Not going to be simple. I have 3 T-shirts I took home from the last demonstration. One said, it was beautiful, at a table given out by people of my age and older. Nishmar et beitenu mishutaf. Let us guard our shared house. Very beautiful. Anybody 73 and older wore that. And then there was a second one that says about the observant left, how small Eman or Emunim, right? Emunim. Thank you. Trying to prove that we too. Okay. And the third, at the table with black flags, monitored by tough guys, because I know a few of them, tough guys, tough gals, who did their service for Israel in all sorts of places. There is that T-shirt that says, Demokratia or merit, democracy or revolution. And they're not joking. I wrote down a note to myself that in the shul I grew up in, very much like Beth Am, a community, a wonderful shul. The technical term that the old men used to sit with the old men. Okay. The old men would refer to the 1 or 2 gamblers in the shul. They had a technical term for them. Bums. I thought it was a Yiddish word. I went home, asked my Bubba, a bum. Okay? We had another term in the south side of Chicago where I grew up. Throw the bums out. Don't be deluded about what's happening. I was asked by someone who I feel very close to here, so what are we supposed to do? You'll find what to do. they'll find what to do. Sound like a commercial side. Yeah. I'm trying to find within my yeshiva, a kollel of young progressive Talmidei and Talmudot Chachamim who are looking towards the future, who will be able to express this in Jewish terms as my own koyach wanes. My problem is my koyach is not waning. Really, I just can't take it. We have to be out there. We have to be out with the right people. We have to say the truth. And we have to, at the very least, as we pray for Tikkun Olam, try to ensure Yeshiva Olam. Basic levels of society, of being civilized. Can't believe I didn't mention Itamar. Not allowing crazed men have their own armies. Own armies in Israel? We got rid of that in 46. You can't have your own army. He won't use it, he'll use it. He's promised to use it, and he's an honorable man. I'm giving him the last word. My last word is, those people can't have the last word. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're supposed to get out of here because of the Women's League is coming in at 11, but for 10 minutes anyway, right? I want to do two things to put a lot of this in perspective. First of all, this is a very Jewish discussion. I've been part of the Priest-Rabbi Dialogue since it started in 1973, and if you remember in 1984, after Pope John Paul II had been appointed Pope, he was shot. And the next day, he went to the prison and forgave the person who shot him. So I said to the priest, "What is this?" Right? And they explained to me that forgiveness in their tradition doesn't mean what it means in our tradition. It means that I'm not going to be stymied by this. I'm not going to let it stop me in my own life. Right? That's the reason why all of the steps of Teshuvah that we talk about are not really relevant there. Or another example of this, for my many sins, I was at one point in front of 5,000 evangelical Christians in the San Diego Convention Center, debating as to whether Jesus rose from the dead. Don't ask me how I got into that.
The question is, did Elliot rise from the dead?
Yeah, that's right. So in the question, what I said to them is, I really don't care whether you believe whether Jesus rose from the dead, as long as you don't try to convert us. That's the reason why I was there. The first question I was asked, and the question and answer was, do Jews believe in forgiveness? And I said, yes, but it has to be earned. And you heard 5,000 evangelical Christians go, right? Because part of the point of being a Christian is that you are forgiven even before you sin. And almost no matter what you do when you sin. And our tradition is really what I sometimes call a put-up or shut-up religion, right? It's a religion that requires not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, and taking responsibility. Sometimes the way I put it is, Judaism spells responsibility with a capital R, right? That we're responsible for what we do, and we have to be in order to have a civilized society. Now, the interesting thing is that, the other point I wanted to make was that what keeps on coming to mind, both in America and in Israel right now, are James Madison's Federalist Papers. If you've never read them, you should read them, right? Because what he points out, I mean, he's the one that argued for a balance of powers, right? Now, there's separation of powers. And you have at least three separate powers in the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, which the Brits did not have, and unfortunately that's what led to Israel's form of government, right? Because the executive comes out of the legislative in that form of government. So the only
it's the unicameral, so it's even worse.
Yes, that's right. And unicameral, which is even worse. In the United States, we have 50 different states, each with these kinds of checks on their power, and then the federal government. That said, we just went through a presidency that really challenged all of that, and it's still being challenged in the courts right now. And God willing, we'll be able to maintain democracy here as well as in Israel, right? But Israel, I think, because of the structure of government there, has a harder time doing it. And God, and thank you for leading that effort, Danny. Really, I mean, it's because I really think, yes. Because I really think that the existence of the State of Israel is more at risk now for internal issues than it ever was because of external threats. And it's and unless this kind of thing can be resolved internally quickly, I really fear for the future of the State of Israel. And so the kind of thing that you're doing is literally, God willing, life-saving for the State of Israel, really. Kollel.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.